Friday, September 13th, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I want to talk about the budget deficit in the US. Yesterday it came out that it reached over $1 trillion with 1 month to go in the fiscal year, and that's the first time in 7 years that it's been over $1 trillion. Yes, granted, September is usually a month where the Treasury gets a small surplus, so we could see that drop below $1 trillion, but we'll have to wait until October to find out. And with that in mind, I want to look at a great book that was actually recommended by one of my viewers. It's called The Mandibles by Lionel Shriver. It's a fiction book, but it's one of those fiction books that is based on reality, so to speak, and it's about the future, what could happen in the future in the United States in about 10 years time, 10 years, 20 years time, and I'll go over it. It's a book, not very big book, but I couldn't put it down. I read it over a weekend, a long weekend, so I'll go over this book and what it has to do with what's going on in the economy, not only in the US, but everywhere else around the world, and the deficit and the debt especially. Before that, let's look at where the markets are this morning. Yesterday, of course, was a very volatile day for the precious metals and all other assets. Actually, bond markets as well in Europe moved around, currencies moved around. ECB announced that they cut rates by 10 basis points, from minus 40 basis points to minus 50. They announced they're going to do 20 billion of QE from November. They had stopped QE December last year. So initially, metals rallied. Gold went up to 15.25. The euro dropped. The pound dropped. Silver went up to almost 18.50. Yields in Europe collapsed, the Bund yield. And then everything turned around. We saw Bund yields go back up, metals go back down, euro and pound strengthened, so dollar weakened. So volatile day. So let's see where we are right now. So gold is actually up $5 right now at 1504. Range has been 1495 to 1506. So we're near the highs here of the overnight session. Silver's up 5 cents at 1814. Range has been 1797 to 1816. Stock market yesterday did finish higher on the day, but way off the highs, of course. Still fairly strong here. The Dow is up 46. The Dow future 27,216. S&P up 6 at 3,014. NASDAQ 100 future is up 14, 79.29. So stock market's up about 0.2% this morning. We're seeing sterling actually rally here this morning. We must have some news about Brexit. I'm not sure what it is. I haven't looked. We're at 124.04, so up 0.5%, up 70 pips. That's quite significant move. Considering we were below 120 recently, does that mean the drop in sterling is finished? I don't think so. It's still going to be very volatile going forward. Euro is up 0.33% at almost 111 now. So the dollar's weaker this morning. The dollar's weaker against the yen as well, down 0.13% at 107.97. Does that mean you should take your money out of dollars and put it into other fiat currencies? No, I think this is just a distraction. All the paper or fiat currencies are all sinking versus this, and silver as well, for that matter, versus these metals in the longer term. Yes, they might be volatile versus these metals, but in the end of the day, they're all sinking in the long term. By the way, this is 1/20th of an ounce, a little maple leaf. which is about 1.55 grams of gold. What else? The Chinese currencies continue to strengthen. We're almost back down to 7 now. The dollar's almost back down to 7. I think it went up to 7.18 recently. Where right now the dollar's down 0.4% at 703.89. Crude oil, WTI is at 55.05, unchanged. Brent just below 60, 59.90. Bond market, 10-year yield is down slightly, but basically unchanged at 179, and the 2 years at 172. So yeah, the curve is steepening now instead of inverting. So the 2 year to 10 years about 7 basis points steeper than it was when it was inverted, of course, or flat. The budget deficit, came out yesterday. You can see here, budget deficit smashes 1 trillion mark, the highest in 7 years. The U.S. deficit topped 1 trillion. The year's not even over yet. U.S. budget deficit tops 1 trillion. So from all news sources, I know they're mainstream news sources. Unfortunately, when I Google that, they come out. Don't get any alternative from Google, do you? Yahoo Finance, U.S. budget deficit tops 1 trillion for the first time in 7 years. So 7 years ago, 2012, the economy was still, I guess, recovering from the financial crisis of 2008. Normally, you would expect deficits like this, as I've said before, when the economy is in a recession, and the Keynesians encourage governments to spend to kickstart the economy, something I don't believe in, the Keynesian philosophy of government intervention. So if we have such a great economy right now with really low unemployment, GDP growth of 2-3%, stock market at all-time highs, how come tax receipts aren't high? How come we're not running a surplus, right? I think this goes to show that things are not well. And what does a really high deficit means in the end of the day? Well, in the end of the year, the Treasury is going to have to keep borrowing. It means the debt's going to keep growing, because that's what it is. The deficit is just the amount that the government overspends from what it takes in each year, and that becomes the national debt. So if you look here, U.S. debt clock, the national debt now is 22.5 trillion. The GDP is 21.364 trillion. So if you take that trillion deficit, that's about 4.6% of GDP, which is huge. Yes, under Obama early administration, the deficit ran like 10-11%. That was right after the 2008 crisis, right? And I'm not defending Obama or Trump or anything. I'm just talking about the numbers. They don't seem to change with any of the presidents we've had since Reagan. Reagan was supposed to be a fiscal conservative. He came in, I think, with a budget, with a national debt of less than $1 trillion, and went out with, I think, 2.5 trillion or something like that. So none of them are really fiscal, how can I say, conservatives. I guess the only guy who actually was close to having, well, or had a technical surplus was Bill Clinton. I remember George W. Bush. He said that the national debt would be paid off, I think, by 2011 or something. These were his projections when he came into office in 2001. Of course, that all went out the window. So that's a huge problem. And with that, I want to look at this book, Lionel Shriver. So Let's read a little bit here in the back, and I really recommend the book. It's on Amazon and everywhere else where you can get books. So it says, it is 2029. The U.S. national debt has grown so enormous that it can never be repaid. The dollar is in meltdown. A bloodless international currency war will wipe out the savings of millions of American families. Their pending inheritance turned to ash. Each member of the formerly formidable Mandible family must contend first with disappointment, then the challenge of sheer survival as they navigate a society in ruin. A frightening yet scabrously funny look at a nation's not-so-distant future. From the pen of perhaps the most consistently perceptive and topical author of our times, The Mandibles, a Family, 2029 to 2047, is Lionel Shriver at her incisive best. What would I say about this book? Well, it's kind of depressing, of course, but at the same time, it's funny. It's a really good read. It's entertaining. And at the same time, it's also a lesson in economics, in monetary affairs. If I had a book that I had to recommend for all my viewers that really show what I think could happen in the monetary system, in the economy, in society, it is this book. And this is The Observer, which is like The Guardian on Sunday. They say, all too chillingly plausible, a profoundly frightening portrait of how quickly the agreed rules of society can fall apart without money to grease the wheels. Well, there you go. Sound money, I think The Observer means. Because what we have today is unsound money, and that's why that happens. And recommend the book. And yeah, and it's not getting any better, the national debt. So if you go to the debt clock here, you can move forward and go to 2023. Let's see what their forecast is. Well, they're forecasting already a national debt at $30 trillion. I wonder where it will be in 2029. The GDP in 2023 is expected to be 24.8 trillion. So the debt to GDP will be 121%. In 2019, it's 105%, right? So I wonder where it will be in 2029, the period where the Mandibles story starts. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Make sure you hit the little notification bell above to be notified of all my new videos. You can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and on DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.